Hi, I'm Carey Mulligan on France 24.
She got her big break in the coming-of-age drama and education in 2009. Since then, she's worked with directors like Steve McQueen in sex addiction drama Shame, Baz Luhrmann in The Great Gatsby, and the Coen brothers for Inside Llewyn Davis. In her latest movie, she plays 1950s housewife Jeanette in Paul Dano's directorial debut Wildlife, an adaptation of Richard Ford's 1990 family saga novel.
What's going to happen to us?
I don't know.
Carey Mulligan, hello.
Hello.
Tell us about your character, Jeanette, and where we meet her in the film.
So Jeanette is sort of your typical 50s housewife. She's really well presented and she is an excellent homemaker. And you meet her at the beginning and you sort of have an impression of this perfect family. And she and her lovely husband and their 14-year-old son are living sort of relatively happily in a small town in Montana. And then her husband loses his job, and that's sort of where the film starts.
Well, there used to be a singer named Lottie. La-di-da. How would that be?
I like Jeanette.
You have to like me the way I am. Anyway, I guess at my age, I don't have much choice.
Jeanette does some terrible things as a mother, which is quite refreshing to see on screen, a woman who messes up, because we often see men messing up on screen. Was that a new experience for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the character I played in Shame was pretty all over the shop. She was having a rough time. But it was, and it comes along quite rarely. And I think what I liked about her is that, you know, she is a really good mum. She's a really good wife. She's just having a really bad week. And I think we allow so much for men on screen and we give them such a long leash. And women are just not allowed to misbehave. And I think, you know, her intentions throughout are relatively pure. I do think she's trying her hardest, but the circumstances she's in are really tricky. And she's been, the thing I've sort of found myself having to slightly defend her in the last month of doing press, but, you know, she is a woman in 1960 without an education or a skill set. And she's been abandoned by her husband with a 14-year-old boy. So I think she's somewhat in survival mode, just trying to get through the week.
You have had some pretty extreme reactions to Jeanette.
Well, we had a couple of people in Cannes saying that she was a terrible mother. And then we had one man in New York Film Festival who was kind of appalled by her and felt that she was sort of reprehensible and unforgivable in the way that she behaved. And it's actually been interesting kind of thinking about it in the last month, just doing press, because I do think that's an understandable takeaway, because we are just not used to seeing women on screen not behaving well. And so this man was appalled because, you know, the women that he has been used to seeing on screen have been, you know, the dutiful wife or the sort of, you know, faithful girlfriend or the, you know, the woman who sits at home crying on the telephone whilst her husband, like, you know, sort of dominates the world or whatever. You know, it's always these sort of stereotypes of women, and they're generally saints, and they don't show any cracks. And if they are, they're just sort of vulnerabilities in terms of sort of their emotion, but they're not actually acting out in any way or reacting to anything, honestly. So I think he was coming from a place of just, you know, his expectations of women being so sort of warped by what Hollywood has presented to us as an idea of women for so long. But if you just contrast that with the way that men are represented on screen, and they're all sorts of dastardly characters, but they're all kind of beloved in some way. So the unlikable trope only really relates to women and not to men, and that's been kind of interesting to think about.
You know what they call trees in a forest fire? Fuel. You know what they call the trees left up when the fire goes by? They call them the standing dead.
And you've said before that the industry has some way in going to catch up when it comes to interesting female roles. Is it catching up now, or are you still being offered those sort of woman-supporting male roles?
Kind of less and less. And I think this year is a kind of amazing year for women in film. There's so many roles and interesting roles. I mean, I can think of like 5 without even trying. You know, there's the entire cast of Widows and The Favourite and Maggie Gyllenhaal in The Wife, in The Kindergarten Teacher. You know, there's so many great parts this year, so I think there has been, you know, there's been a change, but, you know, those films were all made pre-Me Too, so I can only imagine that that's going to improve.
And you made this film with your mates, really.
Yeah, so nice.
You've known Paul and Jake and Zoe for about a decade or so. What was that like? Is it better or is it actually harder?
It's better in the long run. You know, it's only harder for about a day. Right at the beginning, I think it's sort of a little bit nerve-wracking because they're your friends, but also because they wrote it too. And I think when you're dealing with the writer of something, I think I always feel pressure that I'm not doing it the way that they imagined it, you know. It's the same with David Hare, it's the same with with Abby Morgan. Like, if they're on set, you're always aware that they've had this character in their minds for so long and now you are living it out, and are you doing it in the way that they wanted you to do it? But that lasted for like 24 hours, and then it was just a joy to get to come to work every day with friends.
And you said you're quite daunted by playing the mum of a teenager. We see the story unfold through the eyes of your son in the film. Why was that important?
I mean, I think, you know, it was the way that Paul connected to the story in the first place, was through the son and through reading the book. And I think, you know, it sort of speaks to that universal thing that we all experience, which is like that moment when you realise that your parents aren't just your parents, that they have a life outside of it and they have a history before you came along. And none of that really occurs to you for the longest time when you're a kid, but we all remember one moment where we saw, you know, we overheard an argument, or we saw a sort of passive-aggressive thing happen at dinner, or you sort of see the relationship outside of them being mum and dad to you. And some people have much more extreme or dramatic examples of that, and lots of people who've seen this film have been really moved to tell stories about their own parents divorcing. But you know, no matter what family you came from, there is a moment in your life where you see that, and you grow up, and it's a part of, you know, growing up, that we all kind of have to recognise that they're not superheroes and that they are flawed human beings and that they are fallible. But it's part of what makes you an adult yourself.
You don't have to do this.
I know, but it won't be for long.
Not if you get yourself killed?
It's gonna snow. The fire's gonna go out. We're gonna send everybody home.
What if it never snows at all?
Joe, what do you think? Is this a bad idea?
Don't ask him. He'll prove anything.
He's almost grown. He's a saying what happens in this family.
Burned up and you never see him again.
What? Don't say that, G!
You can't keep running every time something doesn't go your way.
Please.
Nearly every role you've played, your character is dealing with death or destruction or drugs or something. What is it that attracts you to these darker roles?
I don't know. I think they're just interesting to me. I mean, I have no, thank God, you know, personal trauma to draw from. I just find those roles interesting.
And you're in the play Girls and Boys in the summer. How do you play a woman who loses her kids when you're a mum?
I mean, it was an interesting one, that, because they offered it to me when I was 9 months pregnant with my son. And I could barely read the script. I was so emotional. And I didn't know what the right call was, because I knew that I would be starting it and my son would be 5 months old. So I sort of met Dennis Kelly and talked about it. The Royal Court Theatre is my favourite theatre in the world, so I was so desperate to go back there. And the writing was so good, but I was nervous of it, only in that I felt like we needed to make sure that it was about hope and not about death. Because really what that play does is honour women who have experienced that and have survived. And there's even a line in the play that says, you know, after that, just continuing to draw breath is an act of heroism. And that was the story I wanted to tell, that people do survive these extraordinary losses and not only survive them, but also then go on to do remarkable things with their lives, like the mother of Stephen Lawrence and the mother of Jamie Bolger. You know, they went on and have done unbelievable things despite having lived through the worst thing any mother can imagine. So the play needed to be about that. And that's what Dennis wrote it to be, but there was a risk. There was a risk in there that it wouldn't be that if we got it wrong, it could easily fall into the other category. But in terms of doing it as a mother, I mean, I made quite a conscious decision at the beginning to separate my kids from it completely. Sometimes it was impossible to forget, you know, or to sort of separate, but for the most part, I tried to sort of just keep my kids out of it. And in fact, I didn't even let them come anywhere near the theatre until we were in New York.
You did bring your daughter, though, on the set of Medbound and Wildlife, and you were pregnant when you filmed Collateral. What's it like being a working mum in this industry? I
mean, I'm so lucky because I get to do it, you know, because I'm the actress. I get to bring my kids with me if I want to, you know. I know a lot of actresses who've quit, or DPs who've quit, or directors who quit because they've had kids and they can't afford to go back. You know, it's an extremely privileged position to be able to not work and just do kids for 6 months a year and then go back and do something and chop and change.
Carey, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did your mother do something that you wouldn't like to have to tell me about?
I feel like I need to wake up.
Mom.